and welcome to the premier daytime news show. This is NewsDesk. On the show this afternoon, we're going to be telling you why top security officials are meeting in Nairobi over the Tana clashes.
We will also tell you how much KRA has raised more than last year. We're talking about 14% higher than the previous collection.
This is NewsDesk. I'm Edith Kimani.
And I'm Bonnie Tunya. 60 minutes of the most exciting news coverage starts now.
Good afternoon. A meeting between Minister for Internal Security and Provincial Administration Kato Ole Metito and leaders drawn from the Tana River Delta, including Garsen Member of Parliament Danson Mungatana, is currently underway here in Nairobi to seek political solutions for the recent clashes in that region that left 20 people dead in just 1 week. The leaders are expected to decide on how the elective seats will be shared among aspirants from the Orma and Pokomo communities. Recently, Metito blamed politics for the recent fatal clashes, saying that local leaders should be investigated in connection with the clashes. The clashes that started in August last year have seen over 150 people lose their lives, with many families left displaced and impoverished. And joining us now by way of telephone to give us more updates on the current meeting is Angel Katusia, who is at Harambee House. Angel Katusia?
Yes, it is.
Please bring us up to speed on what is happening with the meeting. I understand that it's a closed-door meeting.
Yes, we've been waiting for the minister to finish the closed-door meeting with the PS, Mutea Irigo, and the Inspector General of Police, David Kimayo, who are meeting MPs from the area. As for now, we only confirmed that Garsen Member of Parliament, Danson Mungatana, is the only one present with a number of local leaders from Tana River. The meeting is meant to discuss on how the local communities there, which are the Pokomos, the Ormas, and the Wardays, are going to share political seats ahead of the March 4th elections. This is because it is imagined that the clashes in Tana, which have erupted in the recent past, are political and not tribal, as it has been reported before, and now members of the Tana Delta are seeking on how they will settle the political crisis in Tana. It is said that some members of the communities in Tana Delta want to drive away their neighbors for their political gains. Back to you, Edith.
All right, Angel, I also understand that there's another meeting happening in the coast region, a similar meeting in Mombasa.
Yes, we're currently informed that the Coast PPO, Agri, Adoli, and a number of provincial intelligence security officers are in Tana River, also dealing with the same political crisis in Tana River, meeting local elders and community members in Tana River to also see on how to end the tension in Tana River.
All right, thank you very much, Angel Katusia. She's coming to us from Harambee House, where top security officials are currently meeting to chart a way forward on the Tana clashes, especially with regard to the political seats. Details will be coming to you in the subsequent bulletin, so do stay tuned. To politics now, and the church has pledged to remain non-partisan in politics as the general election approaches. Church leaders from various denominations met the two main partners of the CORD coalition, that's Prime Minister Raila Odinga and Vice President Kalonzo Musyoka, where they vowed to put the interests of the country before those of their personal political affiliations. KTN's Asha Mwilu reports.
In the next 49 days, the world's attention will turn to Kenya as she holds her first general election after the promulgation of the new constitution. This will also be a time when politicians will be on the spot over how they will handle victory or defeat after the polls, with the 2007 contested election still fresh in the minds of many. Prime Minister Raila Odinga knows of the power to concede defeat so well. As his CORD coalition met religious leaders in Nairobi, Raila relived the controversial 2007 election and the trials that he underwent.
First we sat there watching the television, and then I saw a gap of over 1 million votes being reduced clandestinely. He told me, forget about the figures, I know where they're being worked out, I'm part of it. But now the bad news, the president is going to be sworn in as the next president of Kenya. And then very quickly, a judge was found who had agreed to come and swear me as the president. And it was very tempting that before they even swear in the president, let us have you sworn in so that there will be two parallel presidents.
Raila said that political leaders who lose the election should be ready to concede defeat for the sake of the country's peace. The meeting with the clergymen was, however, more than just a trip down memory lane. The church raised concern over the current political trends, with the issue of tribalism taking center stage in the discussion.
I think we're at a crossroads again. I see the ghost of tribalism coming out so powerfully yet again.
We have some people who are campaigning on the basis of ethnicity, who are saying, for example, that the votes in Western Province are not for sale. They are only for people who are born in Western Province. But we are saying that Western Province is very much organic part of Kenya.
Our role as church leaders is to support our leaders when they do what is right, and to criticize them fearlessly when they do wrong.
The church leaders pledged to remain united and unbiased during the upcoming election to help avert a repeat of the 2007-2008 post-election violence.
Time for fighting one another is over now. From today, let us all be united, speak one voice. That precious blood.
Politicians in turn were warned against fueling ethnic tensions. Asha Mwilu reporting for KTN NewsDesk.
And while politicians are certainly at the heart of the coming elections, the governing body, the Electoral Commission the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission, is also at the heart of this, and an international election preparedness conference focusing on presidential runoff is currently underway in Nairobi. Now, the conference that brings together electoral experts from all across Africa comes at a time when Kenya is preparing for the March poll, in which there is a possibility of a runoff. IEBC Chair Isaac Hassan is expected to make a statement at the two-day conference on IEBC's preparedness for a possible runoff in the March poll.
We shall benefit a lot from the experience of other countries in Africa who have done runoffs. I know some countries have had challenges with the runoff, while others have actually amended their constitutions, providing for an absolute majority. And perhaps His Excellency may be able to tell us the Zambian example. But I want to all assure you that we have prepared ourselves for a runoff in case one. Of course, every election manager's hope is that there will be no runoff, and that, as somebody said once, a landslide victory is an election manager's best friend.
There is tremendous pressure on parties to compete. However, the implementation of runoff elections will hopefully address some of these negative tendencies through its formation of coalitions. All these alliances may begin as political convenience, but in order to truly consolidate Kenya's democracy, we must urge great cooperation and institutionalization among these coalitions and alliances.
And joining us now is a gentleman who knows very much about election preparation. We're talking to Willis Otieno, who is the program officer at ISA, Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa. And what this institution does is non-profit, focusing on elections, electoral practices, and the promotion of democratic governance. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
All right, so perhaps the first question should be, just based off of that clip, do you think that we're ready for the elections?
I will say that right now we have actually put in place sufficient mechanism for the holding of proper elections in the country. We have a voter register, we have delimited constituencies. The only issue that may not be on electoral management but is lagging the country behind or still on the issue of security. We are soon going to have candidates once the parties have done their nominations. The IEBC has had sufficient staff to oversee the running of that elections. We have a voter register which they have rolled out. Right now it's under inspection. Yeah. We also have the constituencies and the electoral units that are going to be used purpose of conducting these elections. The judiciary has put itself in order to be in a position to actually deal with any post-election or pre-election disputes that might arise.
So the judiciary is ready, the IEBC is ready, the only loophole is in the security. But we are seeing so many problems plaguing that particular department or institution. How do you think we're going to fare in come March?
I will say that come March 2013 on the 4th, I will say the country will be ready for elections. The IEBC will be able to overcome all the challenges. That's even part of the reason why you have this dialogue going on in the country.
Okay, but the IEBC is ready, but what if there's not sufficient security?
That is one main issue that may affect the exercise of the free franchise of the voter, if as a country we don't look into it. Because if you have people being displaced from their areas where they're supposed to vote, where they're registered, then you will not say that the elections in Kenya were free and fair to the extent that sufficient numbers of persons are not allowed to cast their votes.
Okay, well, there's the international conference which is currently going on in Nairobi, and they're looking at the situation of a runoff. Is the IEBC well equipped for this?
I will say that this is actually part of a dialogue that we've started with the IEBC on how best can the country be prepared in the event that we have a runoff. As you look at our constitution today, it provides for instances when we can actually have a presidential runoff. If none of the parties attains 50% plus one of the votes, or the parties fail to attain at least 25% of the votes cast in 24 counties in the country. The IEBC now has to put in place mechanisms to ensure that it is ready in the very event, unlikely event as it says, that we'll have a runoff elections in this country. If you look at the previous opinion polls, say for the last one, all trends were showing that none of the candidates will have attained that threshold.
Right.
But at least the last opinion poll now is trying to show something different. But still, the commission must prepare itself that in the very likely event that we have a runoff, that commission must be ready to conduct the elections.
Okay, and how do they do that? Because they've been complaining that they don't really have the financial muscle to maneuver.
One thing before you talk about the resources, you must talk about even the administration component of the elections. Look at other countries that have done elections before. If you look at Africa, last year we had over 29 elections being held across the continent, 5 of which were elections that had potentials of a runoff. Ghana did the elections, they prepared for runoff, it didn't take place. Sierra Leone had the elections, they prepared for runoff, it didn't take place. Guinea-Bissau, the only country that the elections failed, also had provisions for runoff, but the elections failed, maybe I would say because of lack of adequate preparations for the runoff phase. So the election did not proceed to the runoff phase. So the commission is now engaging in dialogue with countries that have held the elections and actually proceeded to midwife to a runoff. Liberia is one that country, and all these countries are represented in this conference, so that we can have a situation where our commission dialogue with those commissions just to lay down on the table what are the potential challenges that might actually face a runoff election. Okay, and seeing as you've been involved in this for the entire continent, the electoral processes, what are some of the things we can pick up from the countries you've mentioned, Sierra Leone, Ghana, Liberia? One thing that we must all point out is the most important part of an election contest, especially when we're going to a runoff, is on the participation of the political parties, their conduct in the runoff phase. One country that is coming to the conference is Liberia, where the opposition party boycotted the runoff. How do you prepare as a country in the unlikely event that one of the main players in the runoff decides not to participate in the elections? Another component that we brought Sierra Leone for the purposes of a country that is emerging from a conflict. It's a post-conflict country. So like Kenya also, this is going to be the first elections after the conflict of 2007-2008. So we learned from the Sierra Leone experience, how did they manage to midwife through a potentially volatile election that was in a country emerging from post-conflict. Ghana also the same. If you look at the experience of Ghana, the most relevant part of it is in the question of closely contested elections. The Ghanaian elections of 2008 were so closely contested that the declared difference between the winner and the declared loser was less than 25,000 votes. So that is the kind of nature of election that we're soon having in Kenya. Even if you look at our last elections, it was a closely contested contest that you need a commission that is well prepared to actually midwife an election in a manner that none of the parties who are contesting the elections loses credibility of the commission. Okay, and finally, obviously the electoral process means nothing without the voters. Do you think the electorate believes that we are ready as a country? I would say by and large now there is movement towards the electorate believing that we are ready for as a country to conduct elections. If you look at the sufficient public interest that is being expressed in the oncoming party nominations, then you will say that the nominations are precursor to the main elections have actually managed to sufficiently mobilize the public for the main elections. So the public is ready for elections, but one thing that we must point out, in as much as the public will be ready for elections, they must also be ready to accept the outcome of that election. It doesn't mean that you're ready for election, but you only expect one outcome, that my candidate must win. You must be ready to accept that if the outcome of the election shows that your candidate has lost, you should also accept that outcome. That is one takeaway that from the speech of the former president of Zambia, who said that in an election where he lost by less than 125,000 votes, he actually had to come out and say, I'm the incumbent, I have lost the elections, my supporters, you must accept these results. So all candidates and the people must be ready to accept the outcome of a democratic election.
Thank you very much for joining us. Willis Otieno from ISA, Electoral Institute for Sustainable Democracy in Africa. He's been talking on the backdrop of the International Election Preparedness Conference, which is actually going on at the moment. But now let me hand you over to Tunya. He's got something to say about the outgoing parliament.
Many thanks, Edith. And indeed, Parliament, the life of the 10th Parliament has come to an end. What we'll be expecting in the next government will be known as the 11th Parliament. But the life of this Parliament has been interesting. We've seen them pass some very nondescript and some very laws and motions that have angered most of the majority of Kenyans, but also it has been a parliament that has been responsible for the passage of very important laws in the Kenyan society. But just to paint a clearer picture of exactly what it means as this parliament's life comes to an end, I will now throw you over to the newsroom where Aaron Ocheng will give us a perspective of the life of the 10th parliament and even as it comes to a close of business. Aaron?
Yeah, very good afternoon to you, Boni Tunya. This is the exact date that the 10th Parliament was enacted 5 years ago. Now, from tomorrow, the dissolution of this Parliament will be inevitable as it will be unlawfully constituted. There won't be any official announcement by the President, as we've seen in the several other years that the President announces that from today the Parliament has been dissolved, but what the Constitution says is that the Parliament, the 10th Parliament, stands dissolved as of midnight today. So no major announcement from the President. We are not expecting anything from it. This Parliament has been fully guided by the Constitution after the enactment of the Constitution on August 2010. And ever since that day, they have been following their own calendar. The calendar is well stipulated that today will be the end of the Parliament. Of course, this 10th Parliament will go down history as the Parliament that actually enacted the new Constitution. It is the parliamentarians who unanimously said that the previous constitution was outdated and fully supported the current constitution. And will also go down history as the parliament that passed several key bills. If you remember the Mutudo law that regulated the use of alcohol in the country, it was passed in this current parliament. And not so long ago, in December, the Traffic Act that actually regulates how vehicles operate on our roads because we have had so many accidents in the recent past. That law was passed in this current parliament. Of course, there are also other negative things that can be said about this 10th parliament. Of course, latest one being the hefty allowances that they attempted to award themselves. But of course, the president having rejected it, this was a second attempt. The first attempt having the president reject it, and then they were trying it on the second attempt. And of course, as you all know, the president opposed. And also, we can also remember this 10th Parliament as having failed critically to pass the 2/3 gender rule that would have given women a more sizable representation in Parliament. Of course, that will be remembered as one of the things that will taint the history of this 10th Parliament. And of course, we can remember the unofficial defection of members of Parliament. Members of Parliament were elected with the certain parties, but in the middle of their term, they defected to other parties unofficially without making it official, thereby having members of Parliament who are paying allegiance to another party, whereas they were elected on another party altogether. We can also go down as the 10th Parliament as having a record number of women members of Parliament. Of course, we have 22 women members of Parliament, majority of whom were elected, just a few who were nominated, and most of them, 18 of them, actually supported the new constitution. Just a few, 4 of them actually, who were on the north side of the constitution. If I could mention Naomi Shaban, Lina Jebikilimo, Perry Simam, and Margaret Wanjiru were on the north side of the coalition. So Next, what happens next? The next parliament, it will be different. We're going to have two chambers. We'll have the Senate and we'll also have the National Assembly. Of course, the Senate having the senators are the ones who will be sitting on the Senate, and the ordinary members of parliament will be sitting in the National Assembly. So that is the 10th parliament to all be remembered for all the nice things. We've also have vocal members of parliament, the likes of Boni Halwale, and also coming out and standing out from the members of parliament, of course, was a newcomer as Gideon Mbuvi Sonko. Everybody will remember him in this current parliament. So from tomorrow, there will be no members of parliament. They're heading to the various constituencies, most of them vying for other seats, governors, senators, and some of them sticking to the members of parliament. So until next March is when the new parliament will be constituted. Back to you, Bonnie and Edith in the studio.
Well, many thanks, Aaron Ocheng. And of course, for all the good things the 10th Parliament has been responsible for, what will never be deleted in the minds and memories of Kenyans has been the attempt to give themselves a hefty send-off package. And news is that the President has declined that, but of course that will never be forgiven. That has been Aaron Ocheng giving us the good, the bad and the ugly of the 10th Parliament. But sticking to the Parliament and what they have been about of late, civil society groups are now asking Kenyans to punish the members of the 10th Parliament for their greed in passing the retirement benefits bill to themselves to almost 9.3 million shillings each. Speaking during a demonstration in Nairobi this morning, members of the National Youth Congress and the Kenya Human Rights Commission called on voters to nominate any of the MPs from the 10th Parliament for any elective post in the March 4th general elections. They also told Attorney General Professor Githu Muigai to throw out the Retirement Benefits Bill 2012 in the entirety, saying that even if amended, the Kenyan taxpayer will still be burdened by the benefits. And now for our developing story. The Kenya Revenue Authority has registered a 14.4% growth in its Q2 performance, registering 202.8 billion shillings, a growth of 25.6 billion shillings compared to 177.2 billion shillings growth registered the previous season. The tax collector raised 380.6 billion shillings in its half one, which marked the growth rate of 16% from 338.2 billion shillings. Now, the previous year KRA was, however, to add that it might not be able to achieve the target set to it by Treasury of collecting 1 trillion shillings in the course of this financial year. The results come on the back of growing demands from the government's untamed demands, with analysts terming the trend as unsustainable. And of course, that subject of the tax results has been the subject on our social media front, and we'll be sampling those views. And many thanks for all of you who've already been sending on our Twitter handle at KTN NewsDesk. We'll be sampling them at on the course of this live telecast. Now let's move on. 2 people died and 6 others sustained serious injuries when a lorry they were traveling in was ambushed by bandits in Samburu County. 3 heavily armed bandits attacked the lorry at 6 a.m. this morning as it was heading to Marsabit from Isiolo. The lorry, which was traveling at a high speed, was ambushed at Lenamba between Lerata in Samburu East. Now, the bandits were armed with 2 M16 guns and 1 AK-47 rifle. They sprayed the vehicle severally with bullets as the lorry forced the driver to lose control, and the lorry rolled several times. The injured sustained serious injuries and were rushed to Wamba Hospital, where they are recovering and receiving medication. Back to you, Edith.
Thank you, Boni Tunya. Now, if you're caught on the wrong side of the law by the men in blue, it's usually a terrible and inconvenient thing, but it's even worse if the members of the public decide to take matters into their own hands, as was witnessed in Kisii, where residents decided to take on a suspected drunken man who allegedly hit an elderly pedestrian and then tried to escape. Well, the suspected drug driver was cornered about 2 kilometers from the scene of the accident as he tried to escape. The public and other drivers who were using the same road followed him in hot pursuit in what was a dramatic car chase. The visibly shaken and injured man was crossing the road while carrying a sack of maize when the incident occurred. While speaking to the press, the man insisted that the experience he has earned for the last 38 years since he began driving was proof enough that he was a competent driver. I'm not too sure what sort of defense that is. I've been driving for 38 years, so it could possibly have been me.
His experience is his defense. But Edith, on another note, the 10th Parliament is finally going home. We've seen a lot of color in the likes of Sonko and the other interesting members of Parliament, but we've also seen them try to give themselves hefty packages. In the minds of Kenyans, you being a Kenyan this time round, what are your words concerning the 10th Parliament? Me on the spot. Well, obviously coming against a backdrop of the KRA tax collection, you do have to wonder as a country where our priorities are, and that's exactly why we're inviting your views on the same at KTN NewsDesk. As Bonnie Tunya mentioned earlier, is our Twitter handle. We're taking a short commercial break, but when we come back, what do you have for us, Tunya? Well, in business, GM has launched the Corvette 2014. It's the biggest thing in motor industry.